You think you're smarter than a human who lived 20,000 years ago? You're not. Sometime in the last 20,000 years, the human brain lost a chunk of itself roughly the size of a tennis ball. We didn't grow a bigger brain as we became modern. We grew a smaller one. The people painting animals on cave walls, the people who crossed oceans with no instruments, the people who survived ice ages with their bare hands, they were walking around with more brain than you have right now. For over a century, we assumed human intelligence only ever climbed upward. A straight line from grunting cavemen to us, the clever ones, the final product. It didn't happen that way. So here's a test. Without your phone, find your way home from a forest you've never seen. Name 10 plants around you that you could safely eat. Start a fire with what's on the ground. Look at the sky and tell me if it rains tomorrow. You can't. Can you? A human from 15,000 years ago could do every one of those things before what we'd call breakfast. Not because they were special, because if they couldn't, they were dead. Every single one of your ancestors passed a survival exam so brutal that failing it once meant you never had children. And the strange part is what happened after we stopped taking that exam. Because the moment life got easier, something inside us started going quiet. The brain began to shrink. The senses began to dull. The vast living knowledge our ancestors carried in their heads started leaking out of the species generation by generation until it landed where it is now, in your pocket. We didn't get smarter than the people who came before us. We just got to be smart about almost nothing. And we called it progress. This is the story of what we traded away, and it might change how you see your own mind. To understand what we lost, you have to understand what their minds actually held. Picture a hunter-gatherer standing on open ground. To you, it's an empty landscape. Grass, some trees, a horizon. To them, it's a library, a map, a calendar, and a pantry all at once. And they can read every page. Anthropologists who lived among modern foraging groups came back with numbers that sound made up. A single forager in the Amazon or the Kalahari can routinely identify hundreds of plant species by sight, and not just name them. They know which root pulls water from dry ground, which bark breaks a fever, which berry that looks perfectly safe will stop your heart by morning. One study of a hunter-gatherer group cataloged over 1,000 plants and animals held in ordinary memory with the uses of each. No book, no notes. Just a mind that had no choice but to hold all of it. Now think about how much of that you carry. Then there's tracking. Not following obvious prints in mud, reading the ground itself. Skilled trackers can look at a single partial footprint and tell you the animal species, its size, whether it was injured, how fast it was moving, and how long ago it passed. Researchers studying sand trackers in the Kalahari described something closer to reading than to guessing. From a few scuffs in the dirt, a tracker reconstructs an event he never saw, an animal he's never laid eyes on, and predicts exactly where it's going. Anthropologists have argued this might be the oldest form of scientific reasoning on Earth. Hypothesis, evidence, conclusion, running in the human mind tens of thousands of years before the word science existed. And they did it all without writing. That detail matters more than it sounds. When you can't write anything down, your memory becomes the only hard drive you will ever own. Everything the group knows, every migration route, every star pattern, every story that encodes which mushroom kills and which heals, lives inside human heads, or it disappears forever. So memory wasn't a nice to have. It was survival. Cultures like this routinely passed down songs, genealogies, and maps thousands of lines long, recited perfectly because forgetting wasn't an inconvenience. Forgetting was extinction. Their senses were sharper too, and not in some romantic way. Sharper because they had to be. Hearing a snake before you stepped on it, smelling rain a day out, catching the flicker of a predator in your peripheral vision. These were daily exams with your life as the grade. So when we picture our ancestors, we picture something primitive, slow, stupid, grunting in a cave. The truth is the opposite. They were running a mental operation so demanding that most of us, dropped into their world, would not last a week. Their intelligence wasn't lower than ours. It was wider, deeper, and far more dangerous to lose. And about 12,000 years ago, we started to lose it. Here's the uncomfortable part. Your brain is not loyal to your skills. It's loyal to efficiency. The brain is the most expensive organ you own. It's 2% of your body weight, and it burns a fifth of your energy every second, awake or asleep. And evolution is ruthless about cost. Anything that costs that much and isn't being used is not a treasure to be preserved. It's a bill to be cut. This is what neuroplasticity actually means, underneath the inspirational poster version. Your brain constantly rewires itself toward whatever you do, and quietly dismantles whatever you don't. The pathways you stop using get pruned, recycled, repurposed for something else. Use it or lose it isn't a slogan. It's a physical demolition crew working inside your skull while you sleep. So when the knowledge stopped being necessary, the hardware that that held it stopped being built. When farming arrived, you no longer needed 1,000 plants in your head. You needed a handful of crops. When we settled into villages, you no longer had to navigate 1,000 square miles. You walked the same path to the same field every day. The brutal survival exam that had sharpened every human mind for hundreds of thousands of years was slowly canceled. And the brain did exactly what brains do when the demand drops. It shrank, measurably. The skulls don't lie. But now we hit a paradox that stops most people cold. Because if our brains are shrinking, why are IQ scores going up? This is real. It's called the Flynn effect. Across the 20th century, measured IQ rose dramatically, generation after generation. So doesn't that prove we're getting smarter after all? Look closer at what those tests measure. They reward abstract reasoning, pattern matching, classifying things into categories, exactly the kind of thinking a modern world of schools, symbols, and screens trains relentlessly. We've gotten extraordinary at the narrow slice of intelligence our environment demands. We are better than any humans in history at thinking about things that aren't physically in front of us. But that's the trick. We didn't expand our minds. We traded one kind of intelligence for another. We poured everything into abstraction and let embodied intelligence, the body that reads terrain, the senses that catch danger, the memory that holds a living world, wither from neglect. The score went up on the test we invented and down on the test that kept us alive. And then we found a way to accelerate the whole process. We started moving our minds outside our bodies. Writing was the first crack. Suddenly memory could live on a page instead of in a head, and the vast oral libraries began to empty. Then maps held our sense of direction. Then calculators held our arithmetic. And now you carry a device that holds your memory, your navigation, your knowledge, your sense of time, your decisions, all of it in your pocket. We call this convenience. Your brain calls it permission. Permission to stop building the very things that used to define a competent human mind. Why hold a map in your head when the phone never forgets? Why remember anything when the answer is one search away? So the knowledge didn't vanish. We just moved it somewhere the demolition crew couldn't reach. And then we stopped growing the part of us that used to hold it. Your ancestors externalized nothing and carried everything. You externalize everything and carry almost nothing. The question is what that's doing to the thing left inside your skull. So no, you're not lazy. That's the wrong word. And it lets you off too easy and blames you too much at the same time. You're not failing some test. The test just stopped being given. Your mind is doing exactly what every human mind has always done. Building precisely what the world demands and quietly letting go of everything it doesn't. Your ancestors got a world that demanded all of them. You got one that demands almost none of you. We traded the landscape for the spreadsheet. We traded the stars for the screen. And piece by piece, we're losing the parts of ourselves that were built for something older, harder, and far more real than this. The smartest humans who ever lived are already behind us. And the strangest part is we'll never feel it go.